But good evening. I'm Susan Lindsay, Ask Childhood Cancer Foundation's Program Director. Welcome to our new webinar series, Ask Us About. This virtual discussion series is designed to present topics important to families going through diagnosis, treatment, and into survivorship. Our topic this evening is educational plans. We'll talk about 504s and IEPs. Wherever you are on this journey, there has been a significant disruption to your child's school experience. And we hope that you come away this evening feeling like you have more tools in your toolbox to support your child's success in the academic setting. A few pieces of housekeeping before we get started. We are recording this webinar so that it will be available online for those who couldn't make it this evening. We will pause for discussion and comments throughout. So if you have a question, you can raise your hand, which is along the bottom of your screen. There's a toolbar and there's a little raise hand icon. And it does that if you raise your hand, and we'll be able to see it. So you can raise your hand, or you can type in the Q&A, which is also one of the options at the bottom, or if you have a comment, you can type in the chat. So I'll be monitoring those, and we will try to get to as many questions as possible. We're really excited to have participants register from all across Virginia. So welcome to each of you, and thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us. It's my pleasure to introduce our panel this evening. Alma Morgan is ASK's Associate Director of Education. She has supported childhood cancer patients, survivors, and siblings' educational needs for over 30 years. In addition to her role at ASK, she continues to work part-time for Children's Hospital of Richmond at VCU and the Survivorship Clinic. Cameron Brown is a 21-year-old young adult cancer survivor. She was diagnosed in 2018 with Hodgkin's lymphoma at age 16. Cameron attended Thomasdale High School, and Cameron and her parents worked closely with Alma Morgan to navigate the school system when she transitioned back to school following treatment. Cameron is now a junior at VCU in the nursing program. So thank you for being with us this evening. I'm going to start by sharing my screen. We have some slides we're going to go through. So give me just a second to do that. All right, can you guys see that? All right. Okay. So I wanted to start, before we get into the nitty-gritty of educational plans, I wanted to start by sharing the resources that we have available all over the state. So all the information that Alma is going to go over this evening, if you live anywhere in Virginia, you have access to have support from one of our education support navigators, and they can help with all the things that Alma is going to talk about. So I wanted to make sure everybody was aware that if you are treated at one of the 5 pediatric cancer treatment centers on the screen, that you have an education support navigator to help your child and your family. So Lisa Mears is at Inova Char Institute in Fairfax. John Longenecker, who is actually with us this evening as a participant, is at Children's Hospital of Richmond at VCU. Grant Pavlik is at Children's Hospital of the King's Daughters down in Hampton Roads in Norfolk. Amy Fender is at Carilion Children's in Roanoke, and Lauren Downey is at UVA Children's Hospital in Charlottesville. So don't hesitate. I will include their contact information in my follow-up email. But if your child is treated at one of these treatment centers and you haven't met your navigator yet, we can be sure to make that happen for you. So we talk about why we decided to do this topic. As it's still the beginning of the school year, the need for the support for childhood cancer patients, survivors, and siblings is that 2/3 of kids with cancer will develop some sort of late effect from their treatment. So it could be a cognitive late effect, a physical late effect, or a social emotional late effect. And those late effects can impact their ability to be successful in school. And so we feel that it's really important to provide that support to all patients, survivors, and siblings. And then the average number of days that a child misses during their first year of cancer treatment is 43. So that's a lot of days of school. And of course, it depends on the diagnosis. So we know if a child has a brain tumor, for example, they may miss a lot more than 43 days of school if they're having brain surgery and radiation and things like that. We also know if it's a leukemia or a lymphoma, blood cancer, that they may go back to school fairly quickly, but then they're in treatment for 2 or 3 years. And so they miss days over a really long period of time as they're going into the clinic for treatment. So of course, it depends on the diagnosis, what that number looks like, but we know the average is pretty high. So I'm going to hand it over to Alma to get into the educational support part.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. And special thank you to Cameron. Cameron, it's always a pleasure to see you. So proud of you're in a nursing program now, so that's a lot to be proud of, and I know you're working hard. But late effects, when we talk about late effects, we talk about the consequences of cancer and its treatment. And when you're going through treatment, I guess we call them side effects of the treatment, because you're still going through treatment and you're taking medications or having radiation and chemotherapy. And so, the implication of that, whatever you're experiencing, could be the side effects. But after you finish treatment, we call them late effects, and they can show up, years later after treatment. Sometimes I find that the late effects show up as the child gets older and you become, the academic work in school gets more challenging. So a lot of times they don't show up till middle school or high school. Susan, are you going to?
Oh, there you go.
There we go. So let's talk about the, the late effects, the most common physical challenges, and if I have any survivors on here today, these better than me, and parents, the fatigue, when you go back to school, can the child handle a full day? Or do they need a partial day? Are they tired? Do they need a rest period? And I will say that 30 years ago, when I first started working and going and visiting schools, I would see little, children in their little desk, and they looked like little dish rags because they were sleepy and their head was, on their desk. And it would be years, a year or two after treatment. And the doctors were saying, at that time, Alma, they finished treatment, they're a year or two out. But as we've become, the research, and we've learned more, we know that the fatigue can stay with you for quite a while, as well as the muscle weakness and the low stamina. So, when I'm thinking of these physical challenges, I'm thinking, can a child make it from, if they have an outdoor campus, can they make it from one building to the next to get to their classes? If they have a 2-story class, do they need an elevator? Can they go up and down the steps? Neuropathy in the hands and feet and legs, that can cause problems. Transferring classes, going from one class to another with the leg. Had one young lady a few years ago who returned to school, and on the first day back, she took the stairs and instead of the elevator, and she tripped and fell. And then she was very embarrassed, and it was hard to get her back the next day. Mood swings is on here because, as you know, a lot of times you're on steroids for children with leukemia. 1 week of every month, they're taking steroids, and that really does cause some mood swings. It can interrupt the sleep. It can interrupt the appetite, where you want to eat more. I visited one day a little boy in his kindergarten class. I was doing an in-service, and lunch was over, and he came in and he fell on the floor and he started screaming and crying, "I'm hungry, I'm hungry." I said, "But you just had lunch." And he said, "I don't care, I'm still hungry." And we learned later that he was so upset because he was on steroids that week. So I always tell parents, let the teachers know when they're on steroids, so that they, if they're having these mood swings, they're not getting in trouble. altered physical appearance for a lot of my girls and guys, but girls especially when they return to school. I might go check their grades and I'll find that they have A's and B's and everything, but they might be failing PE. Why are they failing PE? Why are you failing PE? And they say, because I'm not dressing out. I don't want to change clothes in front of everybody. I don't want them to see my scars. I don't want them to see my stretch marks if they've had drastic weight gain and weight loss. So what do you ask for there? You ask for a separate shower stall with a curtain in order to change clothes, or go to the nurse's office and put on your gym suit. Unsteady gait. A lot of the children return to school, and particularly for the young people with brain tumors, when they're trying to get down the hall, they might go side to side or just be unsteady. They might need a peer to walk with them from class to class. And of course, then the hearing and the vision loss that comes with treatment, gross and fine motor skill deficits. When I'm talking fine motor skill deficits, sometimes parents will say their handwriting has really declined, or the teachers are complaining and grading off because of their handwriting. And we can always make arrangements for that using the computer more. Of course, then you have the nausea and the vomiting when you're on treatment, and then the pain, the chronic pain sometimes that comes. So all of these are real, and all of these need to be addressed. You might not have every physical challenge, and you probably will not, but one or two can cause, where you are going to need accommodations in that setting. And then let's look at cognitive challenges. What I see mostly, and when I'm looking at neuropsych evaluations or any of the psychological testing that's been done, processing speed is one that I see, probably 75% or more of the time for young people. When I'm looking at those IQ scores, they might have high average intelligence, but with the slower processing speed, that might be in the average range. So in saying high average, superior, you might be up there 120, 130, but if you're looking at processing speed, that might be 90. So when you're talking about 15, 20, 30 point discrepancy, that is big. And that means some accommodations you might need extra time for taking tests, you might need a modified workload. Short-term memory loss. Parents often call me and they say, Elma, we're studying those spelling words and vocabulary words. We know them. And then they go to school the next day and they fail that vocabulary test. So it just doesn't stay with them. Inability to focus or concentrate for long periods, that's often difficult. And just as an adult, imagine, if you're on some type of medication, or if you have chronic pain, how that interferes. If you have a headache, it interferes with how long you can concentrate. We're expecting children to go to school and they're there for 6-7 hours a day and concentrating. So that's difficult. And that's why sometimes I find that our young people, they're sweet and they're good and they want to do well in school. So they hold it together at school. But when they come home, sometimes they're frustrated. And we want to put accommodations in place so that they have a good quality of life. They can go to school and they have a good balance at home, and they can spend quality time with family at home. Poor organization, difficulty multitasking, the visual spatial deficits, all of that, you think about executive functioning. And that's a term now where it has to do with planning, using an agenda book, organizing, knowing when you have tests, preparing, several days in advance, not waiting to the last minute. So we have to concentrate on all of those things, and particularly multitasking, asking teachers not to give them 3 or 4 things to do at one time, but one task at a time to get completed. And difficulty with word retrieval. we talk about chemo brain and the fog sometimes. I had a young man years ago who was returning to school. He was in 10th grade and he said, Elma, I don't need you to go to my school. And I said, oh, that's great. That's great. And a couple days later, weeks later, it was 2 weeks later exactly. And he called, he said, you have to come over here. And I said, well, what's wrong? He said, I don't know. You just have to come. And when we got there around the table with all the school personnel, he said, they call on me and I go to answer and then I know it, but I can't get it out. And that was the difficulty with word retrieval. And it goes in line with the processing speed. So you have to give them a little bit extra time. So sometimes, if you ask a child something or a teen something, and they don't answer you immediately, you're assuming they're not listening or they're not paying attention or they're ignoring you, but really not. Sometimes they're just processing what are they asking me and how to respond. Next, Susan. Oh, okay. And then most common psychosocial and emotional challenges. For our little ones, lack of exposure to play groups and in sports. And, for the preschoolers, when they're diagnosed, sometimes they're isolated from their play group. So when they enter their daycare for the first time or preschool, it's really, really hard to know how to share, to sit in a circle and to listen, and to play with friends. Those skills have to be learned. And for our older ones, lack of exposure, if they've spent their life playing sports, if they started playing football when they were in first grade, in a community rec league, or basketball, and they've played, and all of a sudden, as a teenager, they're on the football team and they could be the star player and they get a diagnosis. That is so hard for them. They're trying to find, because their identity is sports and being a sports player, and it's taken away from them. Loss of contact with friends and classmates. I can't tell you all the children over the years that have told me that once I was diagnosed, my friends just dropped off. At first, they were really attentive and they called and they came around. But after that, they had other groups and friends. And so when I went back to school, I really didn't have any friends. I didn't have anybody to sit with in the cafeteria or to hang with. And it really made me sad. Variation in maturity level. I always find that our cancer children and survivors, that they're very mature because they've been around adults so much, and they can relate to what medications they're on and their diagnosis, and they have great social skills and communication skills with adults, but sometimes they have difficulty relating to their peers and people their age. And sometimes it's because they say, for girls, they might be worried about what dress they're going to wear or the pimple on their face, where I woke up every morning wondering if I was going to make it through the day. So that is a difference. Desire for independence. As our young people grow and they transition back to school and then to middle school and high school and on, they desire independence. Sometimes it's hard finding with all these challenges, but they want normalcy just like everybody else does. So, and they want to be accepted and they want to have friends. So that need for acceptance, that quest for normalcy, we always have to keep that in mind. And we have to, as adults that are on this call tonight, we have to help them find that normalcy. And sometimes we want to protect them and we don't want to overtax them. But I was in clinic just yesterday, and a young lady came by that's 16 and her doctor said, tell her that she doesn't need to work, to me. And I said, well, maybe she does need a little part-time job. She said, okay, Alma, a little part-time job. So a small job. But that is a part of normalcy, as 16-year-olds sometimes get a little part-time job and want to work. So of course she wants to go to school and she wants to work. Feelings of being different. I often hear our young people talk about I'm different. I made a big mistake years ago working with this population because I'd go, the first thing I would hear say is, "Oh, you're not different. You're not different." And I learned that that really wasn't what I should be saying. Everybody's different. We're all different. And of course, after they've been through with some type of, traumatic cancer treatment, they do feel different. And they've experienced things that we've never felt, and we've never been through. So they are different in some regards. Struggle to find a social group in which to belong. I think when I talk to our young people in survivorship clinic, I always, I ask about relationships and friends. I often, say, "Are you going to school?" For our young adults. "Are you going to school?" No. "Are you working?" No. "Are you volunteering somewhere?" No. And if they say no to all three, I say that's not healthy. That is not healthy. To be home and stay home years after treatment and to not be volunteering, going to school, or working, doing something to get you out, that is not healthy. So we have to help our young people find that normalcy, find a social group, and really learn to balance their time. And we have to be cognizant of their emotions for our survivors and for all of our young people. A range, a roller coaster of emotions, fear, worry, anger, etc. It goes on and on. I know our survivors, they suffer a lot with survivorship guilt, and they put a lot of pressure on themselves. They say, "I made it," when a lot of my friends did not make it. So I know, Alma, that I'm supposed to really accomplish something great, and that I really have to make a difference in this world and do something with my life. So they put a lot of pressure on themselves. So we have to guide them there. We also, is there a lot of worry when they have to go for scans and tests? Of course, they're going to worry if is my cancer going to come back? Are they going to find something? And and then when they hear bad news about their friends and all, it's the sadness and sometimes anger is, why do bad things happen to good people? So we have to keep all these turmoils of emotions in perspective. And as adults, I think, and parents, we have to help our young people do that. So, what are the educational laws that are in place to protect students with disabilities or impairment? There are two I want to talk about. Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. That was IDEA. It's Public Law 94-142 that was authorized in, I think it was 1975. And it set the groundwork for a free, appropriate public education for all students. And it emphasizes special education related services. It's been reauthorized several times. In 2004, it was reauthorized again. And that's when it really put those related services designed to meet their unique needs and prepare them for further education, employment, and independent living. So it wasn't just talking about free public education while they're in school, but it wanted to look further to really prepare them for adulthood, what they're going to do with the rest of their life in regards to employment and independent living. And here are the categories, the 13 categories for special education. In special education, IDEA, when it talks about special education, it mainly talks about needing direct services for reading or for math or for the writing, any kind of disability. So, specific learning disability, and I'm not going to read all these other health impairment, emotional disturbances, and you can see the list. I will tell you that when I'm working with a family and a child needs has gone through treatment for cancer. They have a lot of the late effects. They have some cognitive late effects that's really impacting their academic, their reading and their math, and how well they're doing in school. Sometimes I really like using the handicapping condition of OHI, other health impairment, because mainly I don't like labels. Who likes labels? Who likes to? And if you're a childhood cancer survivor, or that's one label in itself, So do we have to say, okay, they're a cancer survivor, and they have a specific learning disability, and they have some visual impairment? I mean, we could go down the list and name them all. Why do that? Why do that? Why not say they have other health impairment? They have a health impairment that is due to having childhood cancer. So they kind of go hand in hand. So that gets you away from having a lot of different labels put on you. Okay, next. Now, this is the one I love, Section 504. It's the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. And it really, you have a physical or mental impairment that limits one or more of major life activities. I mean, if you've had childhood cancer, and we were talking 2 out of 3 have late effects, okay, you're probably going to have 1 or 2 of these physical or cognitive impairments. So would you qualify? A lot of times people say they're making straight A's and the teacher says they don't qualify. But Alma, they're spending hours on homework. They need extra time because of the processing speed, and they're frustrated. They're holding it together at school, and then they come home and they're extremely frustrated and they're tearful. So I say, we need a 504 plan. Now, sometimes I go to a school and they say they don't qualify. They have straight A's. So I have to show them that they do qualify, and I'm going to show you how to do that tonight. Okay, next one. All right, what is a disability? Now, these are the 2 things it says has a disability or impairment. So a disability is a person who has a mental or physical impairment which limits one or more major life activity. So you've had childhood cancer. That's your physical impairment. Has a record of such an impairment. Well, you go to clinic, so you have your clinic dictation. So that's your record. Okay, so you have 2 things. You got that right there. So you got your disability. So what's an impairment? Any disability, long-term illness. There you go. That's the childhood cancer. Or, and I can't see what's that word behind Cameron there on my screen. So
disorder.
A disorder that limits a student's access to learning in the educational setting. Okay, because of a learning problem, a behavioral issue, or a health-related condition. So there you got it. Your health-related condition is you have a long-term illness, that's your childhood cancer, and a health-related condition from it. So there's your impairment. So you fit the definition. And when you're at a child study meeting for a 504 plan, this is what they're working from, what I'm showing you. Next, Susan. All right. So how does it limit? How does it limit one or more major life activities? And there, that's your list that they think about. Concentrating, that's one. No matter what you have, when you return to school after treatment, the fatigue's going to be there, the low stamina is going to be there, the ability to concentrate and pay attention and focus for long periods. So concentrating is the one you want to think about. Also the thinking, just being able to think throughout the day without any breaks. You're going to need frequent breaks because it's going to be so overtaxing. And then of course, can you run the track during PE? Can you run the mile? Probably not, or do you need to take breaks because sitting for long periods is difficult? Possibly. So you have to work with this list here of what are the major activities and how are they affected. So with that, you have to have helpful accommodations. And I talked about that when I was going through some of the lists. The ones I really like using, and if you get a neuropsych evaluation, sometimes you'll have 3 pages at the end of the report of recommendations. You never walk into a school and say, I have 3 pages of recommendations on one, because you're not going to get them. It's no way. So I always tell the families to pick out 6 or 8 of the most beneficial accommodations that you're going to need in the setting. And let's start with those. Preferential seating close to direct instruction. If you have trouble focusing and attention, you don't want to put them over by the heating vent where it's buzzy. You don't want them by the door where they're looking out the door. So you want them set where it's close to the instruction. Bathroom privileges when needed, because you do want them to stay hydrated. So you want them to carry a water bottle and drink fluid throughout the day. And the more they drink, the more they have to go to the restroom. So you got to have that on there. You don't want a teacher that says you have to wait till after class or go between classes, because, you might have to go in the middle of class, unfortunately. Oral and written directions with clarification for understanding. I notice sometimes, with all of our students, you're either a visual learner or auditory learner. And, get it both ways. Have the oral directions that the teacher's giving, and then have it written so you can write it down and get home and you'll know exactly what you're supposed to do. Chunking of assignments into small parts so that you're not overwhelmed. For those with slower processing, and we don't want any child to spend 3 and 4 hours a night on homework. Modified workload with emphasis on quality versus quantity. Rather than doing 10 problems for homework, you might only do 5. Hard copy of notes, study guides, and PowerPoints. I know if everything's on Chromebooks now, and when you pull up your screen, and let's say you're reading the PowerPoint that they presented in science class, and then you have a study guide on another page where you have to fill in the blanks. So you have to go to the PowerPoint, and going back and forth from one screen to the next, it takes time. If you already have slower processing, it's going to take you more time. So if you have a hard copy of the study guide in front of you and you're writing and filling in the blanks as you're looking at the PowerPoint, it makes it much easier. So hard copy of notes, study guides, and PowerPoints. Extended time to complete assignments, tests, quizzes, and projects. Most assignments in class, most tests that's given in school, they are not timed. However, when you get in high school and you have to take AP exams, they are timed. You have to petition to get extra time for them, and you have to send a certain request to the college boards for extended time on SATs and ACTs. So you always want, if you need extended time, have it on a 504 plan ahead of time so that your counselor can fill that request out and get you extended time on the SATs and AP exams. And we do have the Childhood Cancer Education Toolkit, and it's 2 pages of accommodations in there that you can pick from that might be beneficial for your child. Now, Cameron, I know that
Yes.
when we transitioned you back to school, that we really looked at the accommodations. Can you talk a little about that?
Yes. Okay. So I was diagnosed when I was 15, 2018, and it was about my sophomore year of high school. And so that year I was homebound, and it was pretty well. I had one of the teachers I was familiar with. She became like my homebound teacher, and she really helped me with that. Because cancer treatment, like when everything gets hit with you, it was very like crazy all at one time. And I don't know how I would have even gone to school at that time. And then summer hit, and then when I went back, I was still getting radiation at the time when I started junior year. So when I went to 11th grade, I was still getting radiation, and I would continue to get radiation for like half the month of September. And after like ending treatment and everything, I think I ended chemo like the beginning of August. So like I really just ended treatment like right before I went back to school. And I had no idea like how I would feel like going back. I would say like cancer like really was awful, but then going back was like a whole new ball game. Like I had no idea really like what to even expect. And I was already like pretty um I was pretty like I was always like in the gifted classes and stuff for school, so like I never even like thought I would need accommodations like ever. And like I remember like at first like I was very like it like I had A's and stuff, and so like I was a perfect example of like what you said, like they don't want to give like 504 plans to like people with straight A's and like stuff like that. And that's like been a very big like people always look at me and they're like, "Oh, like you're perfectly fine. Like what are you talking about?" Or people always think I'm making a joke like when I talk about chemo brain, and they're like, "Oh, no way. Like that's not a real thing." And I'm like, "Yes, yes it is." And like a lot of people don't realize like if it's like it follows you. Like they always just think like, "Oh, the end of treatment you're going to get better." And it's really like, "No, like you definitely need accommodations to like fit in and at least like be on like the same playing level as everyone in school." So I remember like when I started school, it was very difficult. Like I came back the first day and I had no idea like how tired I would be. And it was like I remember I was like halfway through like last period and I had to leave to go drive back to the hospital to get radiation. And I just came home and I like passed out. I was so tired. And I would come home for like the entire week, like the first week, and I was just like I was so tired, I was crying, it was just, like, awful, and then I remember I had no idea what to do, and then we called Alma, or, like, we talked to, like, the doctor and then, like, recommended you, and then, like, you went in, and you talked to my school and everything, and you were really, like, my big advocator, and you really, like, showed me, like, what I had to do for the next, like, couple years, like, even now, like, I I feel like I'm a mini you, and I take, like, you, like, in my head and when I go to class, and I have to, like, tell my professors, like, in college, like, it's a little different, like, you take, like, your accommodation letter and you hand it to each one of your professors, and, you know, they have, like, hundreds of students, so you really have to be, like, actively, like, advocating for myself. So, I would definitely say, like, take your help while you have it, like, while you can go to my school, like, while you can go to school, like, take her help. Um, but I think a couple of the accommodations, like, really helped me. I remember, like, Thomas Dale was not very receptive to a lot of, like, the, like, 504, like, accommodations I asked for, and so a lot of times I would have to remind them, or just I would even come up with suggestions of how we could, like, finagle it to make it work. I have, a lot of cognitive as well as physical effects. I had neuropathy, I still have it, in my hands and feet. I I received a chronic pain disorder from treatment. I had the delayed processing speed, the word reframement, the like the motor deficits and stuff like that, and the short-term memory loss. I have that. And so I really use one of my favorite ones I think I had, like I even had it in college, was the note taker one. That was my favorite because I have a very hard time, like, when someone's like your teacher will be up, like, showing the PowerPoint, and they're, like, talking, but you're supposed to be, like, writing it down or, like, typing, and, like, that was very hard for me to, like, comprehend what they were saying and write it down. Because by the time I, like, finish writing it down, they're on a whole new sentence, and I'm like, "What?" And I have no clue what they just said. So a note taker accommodation basically means that like I would get somebody else like in the class and it would be like anonymous and they would like share their notes with me, and so I would get their notes, and like that would just benefit me. Like I would take my own notes, but I wouldn't have to be so worried about like catching every little word they said. So like I would always know like it was there and I could just like focus on like what the teacher was saying. And the extended time has always been I've always had extended time, and that has been so beneficial, like, even now in college, like, I'm so thankful for it because, like, the nursing test is all about reading, and it's very, like, specific questions, and if you, like, miss one word, like, you fail the whole question. So, if I didn't have, like, extended time, I wouldn't be able to, like, really take my time and read because I do have, like, that slower processing speed, and it really does take me, like, a good couple minutes to read a question or something. So that has always been helpful. And then I remember going back to school was very, very hard. Like I had no clue, like I would be so fatigued. And then I had a foot drop and all of that. And I remember like during like treatment, everything, you're just sitting around. So you have no clue like how much that really affects you. And I remember when I went back to school, I was like, wow, okay. So I ended up like shortening. Alma got it worked out where I could shorten my days and I would go like a half day every day instead of like a full like 8 hours. I would only go 4 hours every day, and so that really shortened my workload, and so I could do a lot of my schoolwork at home as well. Um, and it was pretty much just overall just a good thing to have accommodations because it helped like just less stress and me like less reduce the stress and everything. And I don't know, it was just very without them. Like I remember even like when I thought I couldn't get them in like college, I was really scared like I wouldn't be able to have like extended time, and so I would freak out and all of that. But that always got worked out. And so yeah, pretty much I just don't know what I would do without them. They're just so
Well,
beneficial.
Cameron, I'm hearing that you've over the years, and it's taken a while, but you've learned to really compensate for some of the
Yes.
challenges and how to not so much overcome them, but find ways to make the
Yes, I found like
challenge
different
easier and
treat
better. Mhm, tricks
yes,
of
I
the
found like
trade.
different tricks. Yes, I found like different tricks to make like life a lot easier with everything. Like for me, in like treatment and everything made my ADHD like 10 times worse. So I'm very like all over the place. And I would always, with that like slower processing, I would always mix up my Tuesdays and my Thursdays. And so I would think that things I had to do on Thursday were on Tuesday. And so I would really just like create a calendar and like make sure everything was planned out. And I would always like remind my teachers to give me like printouts like at the beginning of the year, like with all like assignments and stuff, so I could really just like plan out my time and like plan out when I was gonna do everything. Because I remember like when I first went back to school, like it was crazy. Like there was just so much at one time, and like your brain just needs a lot more time to like accommodate to like as much work. And I was in a lot of AP classes, and going from like getting chemo to going to like 6 AP classes at one time was a lot. So it was just very helpful for them to like give me printouts of everything so I could better like accommodate my time and like what time like I work a lot better like in the afternoons, and like that's when my brain's like good to do schoolwork and stuff. So that's why I would have like the half days, and like I would go home, like I could take a nap and then like work on my homework in the afternoon. And so just having all of that like at the beginning of the year like helped me to plan out everything, and so I could just overall like just accommodate to work on different things that I had. And I remember like with my feet and everything, I had like cast and stuff when I went back to school. So like getting around was hard. So I had like the elevator pass and stuff like that. And then overall, just another one was the extra absences really helped because a lot of like school really is awful on that. Is like they really don't understand like even after treatment, like you have a lot of appointments and stuff, and it's very hard to like. I remember I had one class, or it was one college class I was taking in high school, and I would the only time for my physical therapy was like at 8 a.m. on Wednesdays, and I had this one specific class at 8 a.m. on Wednesdays, and I could only have a certain number of absences, but I was saying that in my accommodations, I, like said I could have more absences, and they were like arguing, and then I had to like pull up like the law, just like you said, like they had to follow it and everything, and I had it um in my 504 plan that I would get like the accommodations, and so they actually had to accommodate it so I could go to my physical therapy, and he had to give me a printout of like all the stuff I had missed and everything like that. But it was definitely just hard, like just overall navigating like advocating for myself and actually like being okay with like telling people like I was different, and that I think like that was just as much of a challenge as everything else, was just like accepting there was different things about me and that I would have to like learn different. And I didn't know like it would take so much to learn different. but like I just really worked on different like strategies and stuff, and I really did like a lot of trial and error and see like what worked, what didn't work. So I remember like when we did like all the accommodations, we just put like a bunch on there, and then I really just like throughout the years like picked and choose like which ones like worked best for me and which I still like have on my plan now.
Well, you mentioned, I think accommodations and just having a 504 plan or an IEP, an educational plan, it equals the playing field. I mean,
Yes.
because to have the plan, you have a disability, and that has been your health impairment. And that's but it's equals the playing field against the peers who do not have that disability, but um you're getting some accommodations that that are needed in order for you to be successful. I never will forget, I went over to a high school years ago with a mother, and we were sitting there and the child was taking an AP class, and um the teacher said, well, no, we cannot modify that workload. That would not be fair to the other students. And the mother said, did the other students in the class have leukemia also? And I thought that, it
I
made such good sense to me. I mean, the teacher was a little offended that had said that, but at the same time, it does say, my
yes, you
child
get a
needs
lot
this
of
because of
weird
what they've
things.
been through.
You get a lot of weird things, especially like when you get accommodations. Like going back to high school, like a lot of kids were jealous of me that I would get extra time on like AP tests or like my SATs. I remember people saying like I only got like a good score on my SATs because I had extra time and stuff. And I was like, well, did you have stage 4 cancer? No. So I was like, I think we're pretty even. And it was very just things people say about it is just like you really have to think like, wow, like I really do have a disability and I really do like you got you have no idea, and like they're just now like learning about it in nursing school and really just like all the different things that really like can happen to you from it, and like how it hasn't really been like studied over time, and like we're really just starting to now like figure out the different things like chemo can cause. I like to say like we can cure cancer, but we can't like we can only like learn to accommodate and like work best with our like late effects and stuff because we don't really have any treatments other than just like modifying and like just like accommodating to the different things that happen.
Along these lines, we have a question that says, how can we educate / inform our kids' teachers? They don't seem to read the 504s or IEPs. Like the teacher said, oh my God, he has cancer. The poor thing. And the parent is thinking, yes, it's clearly mentioned in his IEP.
That happened to me on my first day of high school, like on my first day back. I thought like the teachers and everything were very like aware of everyone's 504 plans, but sometimes like kids will really just like get thrown in there. Like my teacher, like I remember I had made a joke and I was like, "Oh, like I'm bald or something." And then my teacher looked at me like crazy and he was like, "You have cancer?" And I was like, "Yes." And like he didn't think it was funny. But I really just I had to take it upon like myself just to like send them an email and just overall like really introduce myself before like the first day of class and like go over with them like my accommodations and like what I use or anything. So I always just like send them an email before like when I find out my teachers, or I'll like go up to them personally on like the first day of class and like talk to them about it. Or I'm saying like as a parent, like you could always do that as well and like really just like talk through the situation.
I like to recommend too that at the beginning of any school year or the beginning of any semester, whenever they're going back, and some students have different teachers second semester than first semester. I believe that it's always a good idea to contact the guidance counselor or the 504 coordinator and ask for a meeting, a face-to-face meeting with all the teachers that's going to be serving your child. And if you request that, they have to give that to you. So request a meeting, and then you educate them on the diagnosis, the treatment, the side effects or late effects of treatment, and why that 504 and those accommodations are in place. And then everybody is on the same playing field and they know, everybody then knows, and they have no reason not to follow that plan.
Because Alma, I remember you went with me like when I got all my accommodations and we met with each of my teachers like individually and you gave them a bunch of like brochures and stuff and it helped them and like they really learned like from that.
Yes, I think that's
Yes,
really
because they didn't,
important to have
it really
everybody
helped
there.
because before it was just like they said, like the teachers had no idea about the 504, like even how to like help me, or they didn't really take it seriously until like we had that meeting.
Andrea, would you like to make a comment?
Good evening, everyone. I just have to say that Miss Morgan has been a tremendous advocate for my family. When my daughter was diagnosed, she was fairly young. And what I have noticed is that there is a lot of fatigue, but not the sort of fatigue that Miss Morgan was speaking about. It's sort of like that term, that buzzword you heard a lot about, that people had COVID fatigue. And that's kind of what I've seen happening with my daughter, that when you do take the time to introduce them to your child and just give them a snapshot, and then you have those deeper, longer conversations. As time goes on, you can see, I've seen the disinterest in some of her instructors. And so you have to continue to combat the fatigue and the disinterest that they may display because they have so many other kids who are dealing with various levels of behavioral issues that have nothing to do with cancer or cancer diagnosis. And so as a parent, you may also get fatigued and constantly having to advocate or fight or set places on fire. And I say that respectfully because oftentimes that's the only way that you get some results is to keep at it. You have to keep chipping away at those who have no intrinsic motivation to work a little harder in applying those accommodations. And those meetings at the beginning of the year are absolutely imperative, but also like surprise auditing and what they're doing. If they send home a progress report that says your child is excelling at something, test them, test the waters. I know we got one that said that my daughter was doing so well in reading and she was this and she was that, and her fluency is good. But if you ask her how to spell Virginia, the state that she lives in, because it has some of those soft consonants, and everything that she learned as a young one was stripped away with her treatment, she couldn't do it. And so when you arm yourself with the information, dig deep into those laws, dig deep in the fact. You have Miss Morgan, you have our ASK advocates, make good use of them. Don't exhaust them when you can do some work on your own, but when you need them, call them, and do not take no for an answer. Our kids have a right to have a good quality of life so that when we as parents shut our eyes forever, we know that we have done the best that we can to give our kids the tools that they need to thrive, survive, and continue on with life.
Thanks, Andrea.
Absolutely.
I think Holly also had a comment. Holly, did you have something that you wanted to?
Might be muted, Holly.
You should be able to talk.
There
Okay.
you go.
Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yeah, now we can.
Yeah, I agree with the last mom. Alma's been great. We met her when my son was in kindergarten, and she's been with us through the trials and tribulation of trying to get him accommodations through elementary, middle, and now he's in high school. And I mean, if it wasn't for her, like I said, some of these accommodations I've already heard of and everything, and it helped him because of the fact that one, we were fortunate that the schools, the people in the schools knew about, kids with 504s, kids with IEPs, my son was in classes with kids who had IEPs and 504s, so that they understand, they don't know why they have it and why they're in the same class, but he was able, the socialization and the making of friends was much easier. And also, as he got older, they have a thing called collaboration. For the parents who aren't familiar with that, is that when they have two teachers in the classroom, so it's called a co-teacher, they call it. You have your actual teacher, and then you have a co-teacher who can pull kids out and help them, the kids with the IEPs and 504s, if they need like extra time. Or we have a thing on my son's IEP where he can get pulled out in small groups to help with the focusing issues. And they it's very helpful because it does relieve some of the pressure off the teachers. But we've been fortunate that these people are familiar with my son's information, in addition to talking to special ed. But one of the major problems I want to mention is that what we've been encountering over the last several years is the standards of learning that Virginia requires. They, in the younger grades, they're pushing the kids to do well and take it and all that kind of thing, which makes the school look good, because they get credit for how many kids pass it and do well. As you get to high school, it's more of a graduation. Well, when you get to middle school and high school, it's a graduation requirement. And these kids, some kids do well, depending on, it depends on the kid. We've been having a struggle with schools and having a struggle with, some SOLs my son is doing well in, some SOLs he's not. But it's just, like I said, some of the late effects from the chemotherapy drugs that he had to take. But those drugs and the treatment of the chemotherapy drugs saved my son's life. And we and also, Cameron, we might even want to meet with you, because one of the schools my son wants to look at for possible in the future is VCU.
Yes, it's really great at accommodations and stuff. They have a wonderful like accommodation, and that whole team is great.
Right. And one thing I would need one to know about is that beyond high school, how does an IEP or 504 play in? I mean, that's something I've got to get
It
information about.
transitions into a different type of thing. Really, you just go to like they have, every college has like a disability like accommodation, like I don't know the exact name, like I can
Some
look it
call
up.
it Office of Student Support.
Yeah,
We call it Office of Students with Disabilities. So, each school though does have one, each college.
Okay, that's good.
yes, like
An IEP ends in high school. A 504 continues into college, because it's the Section 504 of the Americans with Disabilities Act. But at the same time, if you have an IEP, that can be converted over to a 504 plan at the college level. Now, I will say you cannot at the college level get all the accommodations that you can get in high school, but you can get the ones that you really need. And I think,
yeah, you can get a lot of them. I know like certain ones I can't get. Like I got pretty much all of the same ones I had in school at VCU, like the regular college, but when I transitioned to the medical college, like for nursing, I could only get like my extended time, and like they'll just change them up a little bit. Like I can still get a majority of them, but different ones you can sometimes finagle them, or like by when I say that, I mean like you can work something out, or like you can suggest something else in place of it. And like the people there, you'll work with like a counselor there as well, and you'll talk through like your neuropsych testing and all of that. And like you have like a whole meeting, and it's pretty much like the same process of like the 504 at like like in the high school level, but you're just talking it and you make like a separate little plan, and then it's in place there. And then pretty much like at all the at VCU anyway, like you request like your accommodation letter like every semester, and then you send it out to all your teachers and like just make them aware of everything. And then in college, it does, like you were saying, like it does get your that advocation part never leaves you. I'm afraid you always will have to advocate for yourself. Even the 504 like law, I think it might be a different law. You might know this, Alma, but it extends into the work world as well. You can still get
Absolutely.
like this.
Americans with
You can,
Disabilities Act. It does.
yes,
ADA requirements. And
yes,
and you are right, Cameron. Learning to advocate is the number one. When young people get in college, the parent cannot advocate for them anymore. We have to let our young people. So the Office of Disabilities or Student Support in the college will not even meet with the parent without the young person. So that's why we have to teach our young people to advocate for themselves. And Cameron,
yes.
hats off to you. You've done a wonderful job with
Thank you. Yes, it's a lot of advocating, and it's a lot of just like overall just educating yourself on like the all the different like rules and just certain stuff like that, and just a lot of just educating yourself on different like setting techniques and different accommodations like that will work for different people. And like the internet, like I've just basically like researched a lot of different things that like will help me like accommodate from like my past and like all the different things that chemotherapy like has done to me, and just like living with like the everyday chronic pain and like that fatigue. It's almost, I almost like my counselor likes to say like it's almost like a backpack, and you gotta like just wake up every day and put your backpack on, and you're just like carrying that with you. And so like sometimes it can be really hard, and you're just like you'll be sitting in class and you're like, oh, like my backpack's on and I don't want it on today, and you kind of just like unfocused. But then you just have to like, you know, regroup and just figure out like what you're gonna do, and just, you know, rework it out rather than be, I don't know, upset about it. Like you can still be upset, but you know, you just have to rework it out and just keep advocating for yourself because you do deserve it and everything. And it never makes you less or never makes you like unequal to anybody. It's just you're putting yourself like really on the same playing level as everyone else. So you have to give yourself that chance by advocating.
Absolutely.
Cameron, your insight has really been invaluable tonight. Thank you for
Thank you.
sharing your personal experience. It's 8:03, so I'm going to wrap us up to be respectful of everybody's time. Thank you so much for coming. Thanks, Andrea and Holly, for your comments. And the anonymous question that we got. We hope that you leave this evening feeling like you're a part of a community of support and that you have one or two takeaways that help support your child's school success. If you have additional questions, don't hesitate to reach out to your education support navigator or Alma Morgan. Our next webinar is Thursday, November 9th from 7 to 8. Ask us about coping with emotions and anxiety. We have a guest speaker, licensed marriage and family therapist, Ashley Morgan Sukup, who is phenomenal. Join us for that discussion about difficult emotions and anxiety, which can be particularly challenging around the holidays. We will cover what is happening in the brain and body when we experience anxiety, tips for coping with anxiety and stress, and when to seek additional help. So that will be November 9th. Thank you again, and I hope everybody has a great evening.